In my last video, I mentioned that I'm still rocking the Sony XM2s that I've used and abused over the last few years. I've been really happy with these over all that time, but now they're showing their wear and tear. It might be time for an upgrade. Question is, are the Sony XM5s worth upgrading to in 2023? Let's find out. Now, I've been lucky enough to get my hands on a pair of the XM5s on a trial basis for the last week, and I've used these around the house, on commute, and at the gym. Now, the question I've been asking myself is whether I want to spend the £349 that these babies cost before my XM2s decide to die on me. Now, the first thing I noticed when I put these on is obviously the sound quality. Now, the sound quality of these is exactly what you'd expect from a pair of premium headphones. There is clarity throughout the range, the bass is well refined, and vocals come through very clear. Now, I myself, while musical, I'm not a particular audiophile. I love my music, but I'm not there listening to every little intricate detail of the sound like some experts may be. Things like frequency response and cut-offs and drop-offs are not something that I familiarise myself particularly. I more see it from a layperson perspective. Now, from that layperson's perspective, I'll admit listening to hi-fi tracks and things like the YouTube 8D things that you can find, it really blew me away. Being able to use the 360 reality audio setting in Amazon was very cool, making me feel like I was kind of part of that action. And now, from the XM2s, these premium sounds even come with the startup of the headphones, with the clarity of the audio startup sound and the voice sounding much more modern and clear. Now, in saying this, I also briefly got my hands on a pair of XM4s and was listening to them back to back. And honestly, while with some tracks I did notice a difference between the two, with most I couldn't tell a distinct winner in either. One thing the XM5s are really good at though is their active noise cancellation, and it really is fantastic. Now, while when you don't have any music playing you can still hear people's voices coming through, once you just turn on a little bit of sound, they all fade away into the background. Now, background rumbles, however, did feel like they completely disappeared as soon as I plonked on those cans, which makes them very ideal for commutes and for plane rides. Now, the noise cancellation also automatically optimizes depending on where you are. Now, this could be done through the app with the older versions of the XMs. However, I would never personally use that as it just takes up a bit too much time, and I'm unsure as to the difference it actually makes. But the results of the ANC in the XM5s mean that I'm more than happy to say that it does a great job. The ambient sound mode is also very impressive and scalable from 1 to 20, with 20 letting in the most sound and 1 letting in the least. Now, there's a very useful UI in the app which shows you what you should be hearing depending on where you put this scale. You have a couple of people, a car, and a bridge to let you know just how much sound you should be hearing. Now, one thing I did want to check with these headphones is how much wind noise impacted the listening experience. With the ANC on, I couldn't hear the wind. It was fantastic. I couldn't hear a darn thing when I had the ANC on. Ambient mode was a completely different matter, obviously, so that wind really made them unlistenable as it's blowing past. An issue when you are on calls. Now, when you're on calls, ambient mode is automatically turned on, so if you're in a windy environment, you hear all of that wind. Funnily enough though, the person that you're talking to doesn't. Now, this is a test of the XM5 mic in a pretty ideal scenario. In the bedroom, not too much space, with a carpet floor. Now, in this scenario, I don't think the XM5s are fantastic. They do sound a little tinny. However, you can still be heard clearly, so not the end of the world on that one. However, if we go to outside, now this is another test of me obviously walking down the street with some cars going around in the background and some wind passing by. Now again, it does seem to do a fantastic job of keeping out all of that excess noise and focusing simply on my voice. So I'm just like a little impressed. Okay, now I want to come to what I feel is probably the most important aspect of the headphones, and that is comfort. Now, sound quality and active noise cancellation are obviously very important factors in the headphones. However, if they're not comfortable, you're not going to wear them. Now, when it comes to the XM5s, I find comfort as a mixed bag. Now firstly, in terms of weight, the XM5s weigh 5 grams less than their predecessors and really are light on their head. Now the headband is very plush, with nice soft material both in and outside. The cans themselves also have very soft material and it does feel very nice on the head, at least at first. Now the problems I have with the comfort with the XM5s comes down to two main factors. The first is the clamping force, how hard it's clamping onto the head itself. And the second is the depth of the ear cups. Now with the clamping force, while the ear cup material itself is very soft, when they're on the head for an extended period of time, I do feel a bit of, discomfort around the ear where the contact is happening. Now this is not ideal when you want to wear it for long periods of time, whether it's on a plane or on a particularly long commute. Now potentially this clamping force may reduce over time as the headphones become more worn. However, I don't feel it's great when that's the first experience of having them on. Now, in regards to the second point, in terms of the depth of the ear cup, I feel like this is an odd thing for Sony to have gone to. Reason being, the ear cups themselves have been made larger to accommodate for larger ears. So from that, I would have thought that they would also increase the depth of the ear cup, but in fact they've reduced it from the XM4s. What this means for day-to-day use is that while the ear cups sit around the ear, your ear is getting pushed down a little bit by the ear cup itself. Now while to begin with this feels absolutely fine, again the longer you have them on, the more you notice it and the more uncomfortable it becomes. Also, in terms of comfort, the active noise cancellation on the XM5s I feel are quite adept at reducing that pressure that can sometimes be felt from the noise cancellation happening. Now honestly, when it's on I barely notice it, but I do register the pressure of the actual ear cup on my ear. Now we're going to come to the feature set of the Sony XM5s, and here is another place where it really does shine. Now I'm glad to see they've kept the touch controls from previous generations where all of them are on the right ear cup. It's swipe up and down to change the volume, swipe right and left to skip forward and skip back track. You can double tap to pause and double tap to play. And the headphones also auto pause when you take them off, which I think is a lovely feature that I do miss on my XM2s. Speak to chat also makes its return on the XM5s and the XM4s. Now this is a feature where if you turn it on, you simply need to talk and the headphones pause and turn on ambient sound when you have a conversation. Now personally I'm not a huge fan of this feature, although I do see its uses. One thing with the speak to chat feature is that it also takes a bit of time to come back in once you've stopped talking, though this can be mitigated by simply putting your right hand over the ear cup to bring it back. Speaking of the right hand over the ear cup, another thing that makes its comeback is the quick attention feature, which I certainly do like. Putting your hand over the ear cup turns on ambient mode and pauses your music so you can have a conversation. Again, great for a plane or to have a quick conversation with someone at the coffee shop. With regards to the physical button combination on the XM5s, you get the same power button and NC/ambient button that you do on previous versions. Now the power button does exactly what you'd expect. It is there to turn the power on and off and also to initiate pairing. Now the NC and ambient button actually serves a dual purpose. The first is to cycle through noise cancelling and ambient mode. Its second function though is in what it calls quick access. When you double press or triple press, which can be set through the app, it can be assigned to a certain application that will turn on and then play your music. Now one thing to note here is that that application, in my case Spotify, needs to be open already on your phone in the background for this to work. Now for me, simply having the double tap to play on the ear cup actually accesses Spotify when this is the case anyway. So I find the function of this to be a little redundant. The last features on this right ear cup is to hold one finger on the side to access Google Assistant and two fingers to activate and deactivate the speak to chat function. Now the battery life on the XM5 is pretty darn good and up there with all of its competitors. I leave ANC on all the time, and after my week of testing it's still above 50% despite using it for a couple hours every day on commutes. There's also a staggeringly impressive quick charge feature on these that gives you 3 hours of playtime with just 3 minutes of charge, which I feel like is astounding even if I've never used that particularly myself. And now we come to the case of the XM5s, that for me I find quite of a mixed bag. Now the reason for this is that the XM5 case is actually bigger than its predecessors by a considerable margin. It is thicker and longer. Now the reason for this is twofold. One is the fact that they don't fold like the previous generations. The second is there is a nice amount of plush material inside to keep your headphones safe. This is where the mixed bag comes in. I actually quite like this case in terms of its softness and the amount of protection it gives to the headphones. There's also quite an intuitive feature where all of the cables are kept in a little compartment in the center of the case. I like the fact that it opens and closes and doesn't fall straight out if you dropped the case itself while it's open. Now, while the compartment is quite nice, the one glaring omission for me is the fact it doesn't have an airplane dual jack. Now, this did come with the XM4s, and I'm aware that a lot of airlines have now moved to simply having an auxiliary jack instead of that old-fashioned one. However, I still think it would have been nice to include with the XM5s. Now, I'm very briefly going to mention the elephant in the room, and that is the XM4s. Now, the XM4s are £100 cheaper and come with pretty much the same feature set as the XM5s. Now, personally, as I've mentioned before, when I was listening to audio between the XM5s and the XM4s, I found it really tough to notice a distinguishable difference, particularly when you are using regular Spotify files. If you're using high def audio or spatial audio or even the 8D audio you can find on YouTube, you may see a more significant difference. Also, again, if you're an audiophile or an expert who looks at frequency response, you may notice it much more as well. However, personally, I'm not seeing a huge difference between the two, and for £100, it's hard to justify the leap up to the XM5s. The only reasons that I can see to make that big leap is that if you want the best noise cancellation, you don't mind the case, or in my case, you actually quite like it, and you're happy with the force and comfort of the XM5s. Now, all in all, as much as I really love the noise cancellation and the case of the XM5s, I feel like I would probably lean towards the XM4s or the Bose QC45s if my XM2s were to die today. But please make sure to leave your own thoughts in the comment section down below, and please make sure to like and subscribe. This has been Content to Tech. Have a good one.